They thought that they can tease her just by racism, but they did not know that she had power to change everything. The low hum of Valerie Chambers' luxury sedan was the only sound accompanying her as she drove home late that evening. The suburban streets of Anaheim Hills were calm, exuding a deceptive tranquility. It was the kind of calm that could momentarily trick anyone into believing the world was at peace. But for Valerie, peace was an elusive concept. A respected judge with over 2 decades on the bench, Valerie often found herself mentally replaying the day's court proceedings during her nightly drives. Today had been particularly challenging. She had spent hours deliberating on a high-profile case, a task that required her utmost focus and a keen sense of judgment. Yet, as sharp as her mind remained, her body betrayed her. A weariness tugged at her shoulders, compounded by thoughts of her daughter's upcoming graduation. The graduation speech loomed at the back of her mind, another promise she had made to herself to complete. She had vowed to take a break once the current case wrapped up. Life, she mused, was hectic, but undeniably good. Then, the flicker of red and blue lights in her rearview mirror shattered her reverie. Valerie's brows furrowed as she slowed her car and pulled over to the side of the road. She wasn't speeding, she hadn't skipped a signal. With methodical precision, she reached for her purse where her driver's license and registration were neatly stored. The reflection of the patrol car's lights danced across her dashboard, creating a strobe of anxiety within her. 2 officers approached, their figures silhouetted by the flashing lights. One tapped on her driver's side window with a force that felt unnecessarily aggressive. "Evening, ma'am. License and registration," the taller officer barked. His tone was clipped, devoid of courtesy. Valerie handed over her documents without hesitation, her years of experience telling her to remain calm. "May I ask why I was pulled over?" she inquired, her voice steady but curious. The second officer, stockier with a shaved head, leaned closer. His flashlight swept across the car's interior, as if searching for hidden secrets. "We ask the questions," he muttered, his tone dismissive. Valerie's professional instincts urged her to maintain composure. Years of courtroom experience had taught her that escalation often led to undesirable outcomes. "Of course, officers," she replied, keeping her voice measured. But what began as a routine interaction quickly spiraled. Questions turned to accusations, and accusations to veiled threats. Valerie's attempts to explain her late-night drive and her career as a judge were met with skepticism and disbelief. "A judge?" The stocky officer, whose name tag read Daniels, scoffed. "That's a new one." The taller officer, Reynolds, smirked as he examined her license. "Mind telling us what you're really up to?" he pressed, his condescension palpable. Valerie inhaled deeply, choosing her words with care. "I'm heading home after a late night at work," she explained. Her response seemed to amuse the officers. Reynolds leaned in, his smirk widening. "You got any proof of that, Judge? Or should we just skip to the part where you tell us the truth?" Despite the growing tension, Valerie remained calm. "Officers, I've complied with your requests. If there's an issue, I'd like to address it." Reynolds' expression darkened. "Step out of the vehicle," he ordered abruptly. The weight of his words pressed down on Valerie. She knew her rights, understood the lack of legal grounds for such a demand, but experience also told her the risks of refusing. With a composed sigh, she unbuckled her seatbelt and stepped out into the cool night air. Daniels moved closer, his hand resting ominously on his holstered gun. "Turn around," he commanded. "Excuse me?" Valerie asked, disbelief lacing her tone. "Turn around, hands behind your back." "Are you detaining me?" she asked, her voice steady but edged with incredulity. "On what grounds?" Reynolds shrugged, his smirk now a grin. "Suspicious behavior. We'll sort it out at the station." The cold metal of the handcuffs bit into her wrists, and humiliation surged through Valerie as she was guided toward the patrol car. Neighbors began to gather, their curiosity piqued by the commotion. An older man in a robe and slippers stood on his porch, his expression a mix of concern and confusion. Valerie held her head high, refusing to let her dignity falter. The drive to the station was silent, save for the occasional crackle of the police radio. She stared out the window, the weight of the situation pressing down on her. Thoughts of her daughter, her career, and her reputation flooded her mind. The holding cell was cold and impersonal, its starkness amplifying her discomfort. Valerie sat on the bench, her wrists aching from the cuffs. They had taken her belongings, leaving her with nothing but her resolve. Minutes dragged into hours as she mentally cataloged every detail of the interaction, knowing they would be crucial later. Through the bars, she could hear the officers laughing, their voices carrying into the dim corridor. She really thinks she's someone important, Daniels mocked. Reynolds' laughter followed, the sound grating against Valerie's patience. She closed her eyes, drawing on the inner strength that had seen her through countless courtroom battles. The sound of a door slamming broke her concentration. A commanding voice echoed through the station. "What's going on here?" Valerie turned her head to see Michael Harrington, a district attorney and longtime colleague, storming into the room. His usually calm demeanor was replaced by visible fury. "Judge Chambers," he called out, his gaze locking onto her. "What in the world is this?" The officers stiffened, their earlier bravado evaporating. "It's just routine," Reynolds stammered. "Routine?" Harrington's voice cut through the air like a whip. "You arrested a sitting judge on what grounds?" Reynolds fumbled for words, but Harrington didn't wait for an explanation. "Unlock that cell, now." The officers reluctantly complied, their confidence shattered. Valerie stepped out, her posture as dignified as ever. She met Harrington's gaze with a nod of gratitude before turning to the officers. "Gentlemen," she said, her voice calm but resolute, "we'll be seeing each other again soon." The events that followed marked the beginning of a much larger battle. The courtroom where Valerie presided days later was packed, the atmosphere electric with anticipation. As she delivered her judgment, her words resonated beyond the walls of the chamber. "Justice," she declared, "is not a privilege reserved for the few. It is a right, and it is my duty to uphold it without bias, without exception." Her decision held the officers accountable while calling for systemic change. It was a moment that underscored the importance of fairness, empathy, and accountability in law enforcement. In the days that followed, Valerie's story became a catalyst for conversation and reform. Community leaders invited her to speak, and her voice became a rallying cry for justice. Through it all, she remained steadfast in her mission to ensure that no one else would endure what she had. For Valerie, the fight for justice wasn't just professional, it was deeply personal, and she wasn't about to let it go.